The purpose of this video is to help you understand your stock options and to incorporate a sound strategy when it comes to exercising your options. But my personal goal is to help executives like you stop for a moment and truly assess your situation. One of the most enjoyable aspects of my work is when I sit down with my clients and they realize they're closer than they thought to being able to live their ideal lifestyle. I've sat down with clients who are in a position to dramatically change their lifestyles, and they didn't even realize it until we talked. Like building a house, it's important that we start with a solid foundation and then start building the structure. When it comes to stock options, I feel there are 5 elements to a solid foundation. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm often asked, Dan, what really is a stock option? A stock option is issued to employees of public companies as a form of equity compensation. A stock option also gives the employee the right to purchase shares of stock at some time in the future based on the terms of the options agreement. To exercise the option, you must pay a specific price stated in the option agreement. This price to be paid goes by various names such as exercise price, strike price, grant price, or even the option price. As an example, Mary was given an option to purchase 1,000 shares of her company stock at $25 a share. If Mary exercises all of her options, she will pay the full $25,000, and if the stock is currently trading at 40, she will own $40,000 worth of stock, and she would have only paid $25,000 for the stock. The second element of a solid foundation is to understand the vesting schedule. Generally, the recipient of a stock option is not allowed to exercise the option immediately. The term of the vesting schedule, what they're referring to is when the option becomes exercisable. In other words, when the option is considered vested is when enough time has passed that you can exercise the option. The main purpose of the vesting schedule is to retain their top talent. An example is John received an option to buy some stock a year and a half ago. Under the terms of the agreement, he can exercise 25% of the option after the first year, 50% in the second year, 75% in the third year, and 100% in the fourth year. Since he's owned the shares for over a year and a half, 25% of his options are currently vested. The third element of a solid foundation about your stock option is understanding the value of the option. There are 2 main components that make up the value of the option: the intrinsic value and the time value. The intrinsic value is the difference between the exercise price and the current market value, multiplied, of course, by the number of shares. In the previous example that I gave, Mary's stock was trading at 40 and her exercise price was 25, and she had 1,000 shares. So the intrinsic value is the difference between 40 and 25 times 1,000 shares. It's $15,000. The time value of an option is really the theoretical upside potential of the option. Normally, the longer an option has until it expires, the more the time value it's going to be worth. And also, the higher the intrinsic value, the less the time value is worth. The fourth element of a solid foundation is understanding the type of stock options that you have. When it comes to stock option, there's really only 2 types of option. There's non-qualified options and there's incentive stock options, or better known as ISO. The biggest difference between the 2 is in the tax consideration. In the non-qualified options, the employee does not report any income when they receive the stock option or when it was granted or even when it becomes exercisable. However, when you exercise your option, you report the income, which again is the difference between the value and the amount paid. In the previous example with Mary, the intrinsic value in her option was $15,000. If she exercised it, she would have to report that $15,000 as ordinary income, and of course it would be subject to federal, state, and Social Security tax. For ISOs, the tax consequences of exercising the options are considerably more complicated than for non-qualified options. Generally, ISOs involve alternative minimum tax, but ultimately there's 3 different tax scenarios depending on when the executive exercises the options. In the first scenario, if the executive exercises the options and sells them immediately, the second scenario is when the shares are sold in the same calendar year as the exercise, and the third scenario is when shares are sold in the following calendar year. The fifth element is understanding when to exercise the options. I would say this is the most common question that I'm asked. When should I exercise my options? Of course, knowing when to exercise your options is a really difficult question. The problem is that when you exercise your options, you're really trying to protect that intrinsic value or the profit, but ultimately this will abandon any potential upside or time value. In other words, by exercising the option, if the stock continues to go up, you're not going to recognize any further appreciation. On the other hand, if the stock goes down and you've exercised, you basically are protecting yourself from further losses. There are many factors that go into deciding when to exercise your options, such as the time value and intrinsic value, as well as the volatility of the stock and the expiration. In my next video, I will discuss not only when to exercise the options, but also what options would be best to exercise first.